Welcome. It is I, the wonderful Pill Eater, and I'm tuning in today to talk about the peculiar and fascinating work of Journey to Vapor Island, one of the most cutting-edge book of the last century, written by my stalwart Mr. Robert Stark. Today, he'll be reading the very first chapter of Journey to Vapor Island, which you can only get on Lulu.com. This book will send chills down the spine of the innocents. But further ado, I do not know what to say about the book, other than that it is shocking, mysterious, phantasmagorical, and Huberdecker. With me right now is Robert Stark reading the very first chapter to Journey to Vapor Island. Drumroll, please.
My name is Noam Metzenbaum. I am 15 years old and live in New York City with my mother in this tiny apartment. I know I am destined for great things and will one day escape these confines. You see, my father was a great aristocrat. I shall someday carry on his legacy, but for now I am in hibernation, awaiting my ascension, my moment to rise up to my rightful place in this world. I am the emperor of mankind, damn it! I will save mankind from its hedonistic desires, crush false social orders, and annihilate all that is ugly in this world. I shall establish a new order that will bring justice to this broken world, where the vile and wicked rule, and the noble and greatest minds are crushed and made to suffer in silence. I am the only one standing in the way of utter nihilistic violence. This world was never meant for me. You see, God has put me on this earth for one thing only, and that is to save mankind from their sins and to find my one true love. Noam's mom interrupts his writing. Noam, hurry up. You're late for school. I don't want to go, Noam replies. Noam puts down his journal and looks out the window of their one-bedroom apartment from the 23rd floor, which overlooks the Lower East Side, the East River, and the skyline of Midtown in the distance. He thinks, I feel so magnificent up here in my tower, observing the useless plebs down below like insects. Someday this will all be mine, but today I would rather stay home and write in my journal. Noam, get ready. Don't you want to make something of your life? Shouts Noam's mom. Noam replies, I am being held back in this penitentiary of plebeians. Aren't you being a bit overdramatic? Replies Noam's mom. Now get ready. You don't want to be late again. Noam reluctantly gets ready for school. Barely making it in time, he hops on a city bus which is full of homeless people, ghetto blacks and Puerto Ricans, and elderly Chinese immigrants. I don't belong here, Noam quietly mutters to himself. Noam prefers walking to the slow and crowded bus. He doesn't mind the subway, but there isn't a stop close enough to his home. His mom told him that if he has another tardy, she will cut off his allowance. Noam arrives at school. He looks around anxiously, knowing he is out of place. He thinks, I feel so meek and small around these wild beasts, yet they are so far beneath me. One day I will grow strong and crush them like ants. They have no value to this world. They are a waste of space. Noam walks to class, trying not to make eye contact with the thugs in the hall. He hears taunting, Yo, what, bitch? Come give me some sugar. Noam gets to his history class, which is his favorite subject. The teacher, Miss Letitia, is a sassy, overweight black woman. Noam has utter contempt for her lowly intellect and crude demeanor. He looks at the other students in disgust. Noam thinks, I'm not a racist. If they could only see my visions, they will follow me to greatness. Wishful thinking, perhaps. Maybe I should stop listening to my mom and her silly friends. There was a group of black kids making noise in the back of the class. Noam always sits to the front to avoid them, since the front rows are always empty. Miss Letitia proclaims, Today's history lesson is the legacy of slavery and its effects on inequality in modern-day American society. One of the black boys shouts, "Down with the white man!" Miss Letitia says half-jokingly, "Calm down, Jerome. We'll get to that shortly." She starts her lesson talking about the housing projects across the street, which are mostly filled with underprivileged blacks and immigrants. Jerome interrupts, "And them rich white Jews be chillin' in the penthouses uptown." Miss Letitia doesn't know how to respond. Then she replies reluctantly, "Well, yes, Jews are white and can be privileged, but they have also suffered great discrimination like African Americans and Latinos have." The black kids in the back start booing her. Noam finds the situation amusing. Even though he is Jewish, he was never really accepted by the rich Jewish kids growing up. He thinks they are nothing but petty bourgeois little brats, not true aristocrats like me. Miss Letitia continues, "Well, class, there's a lot of inequality in America today. We are still recovering from the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. We need to address white privilege and end all inequality by removing the white patriarchy from power." Noam gets up and proclaims, "White patriarchy? This city is owned by rich bankers. Bankers can be Jewish, Chinese, and Indian. This city is ruled by false money elites and those who produce cultural filth and manipulate the lowly masses of slaves to do their bidding. The genuine elites are suppressed and—" A black girl cuts him off. "Check your white privilege ass. Look at all this preppy-ass cracker in his Ralph Lauren polo," another black boy chimes in. Noam gets up and shouts, "I live in a studio apartment with a broken heater in the middle of winter and no air conditioning in summer. I have no friends. My mom can barely pay the bills. I'm not accepted by those rich fuckers, fake elites, and you owe nothing but their pawns. Some of you may be lucky enough to get affirmative action and a cushy government job. Most of you will end up unemployed or incarcerated. All disposable slaves." Noam is about to cry, but manages to hold it in. The class ridicules him. "Fucking crack-ass bitch, stupid white boy, fuck off, Jew." There's an awkward silence. Miss Letitia is giving Noam a nasty look, but doesn't know how to handle the situation. A shy black girl who sits by herself in the row behind Noam gets up to speak. She explains, "Maybe he does have a point. My uncle who lives in Georgia is African American, and he owns his own business and a big house in the suburbs. He worked hard his entire life to get to where he is. White people did a lot to help him succeed in life, but he pulled himself up from poverty through hard work. He is my personal hero. He has told me that in his town on the outskirts, there are many whites living in trailer parks, addicted to meth. All their jobs have been sent to China, and they are lucky if they can get a job at Walmart, but most are on welfare, drinking themselves to death. Jerome is having none of this. Lazy-ass white crackers. He hoots, we were slaves. We paid our dues. Those whites are too damn lazy." Miss Letitia still doesn't know how to respond, but luckily for her the bell rings and the class is over. After class, the shy black girl approaches Noam in the hallway. She says, "Interesting class, huh?" Noam replies awkwardly, "Yes, I think so." She giggles. "My name is Vanessa. Want to catch a bite at pizza after class?" "Sure, why not?" Noam says. Noam notices the black boys from the back of the class staring at them in shock and jealous rage. The nerdy white boy talking to the cutest black girl in class. Noam gives him a smug grin and sets a time to meet with Vanessa after class. After class, Noam is out on the schoolyard for lunch break. He is reading a book by himself while eating a bagel with cream cheese. He is approached by the black and Hispanic boys from history class. Jerome approaches Noam and says, "What you doing with Nessa?" Noam replies, "I don't know." They start laughing. Jerome says, "What you mean you don't know, fool? I saw you with my homegirl Nessa. She ain't into no white boys." Noam replies, "She's a nice girl. We were just friends." Jerome says, "You're trying to stick your tiny little white dick into Nessa. That ain't right." "Leave me alone," Noam responds. Jerome pushes him. "Fuck off, white bitch." One of Jerome's friends grabs his backpack and says, "What do you got in there, white boy?" They empty out his backpack, which is filled with books. They pull out his favorite book, which is a collectible of old photographs of New York City that his grandfather Saul gave to him. Jerome proceeds to rip the book up into pieces. Noam begins to cry. That was his favorite book, which reminded him of his late grandfather and gave him great aesthetic inspiration. Noam thinks, they have no appreciation for civilization or beauty. Noam yells at them in tears, you are all descended from slaves, while my father is a great aristocrat. One of the boys, who is a Dominican named Angel, and a baseball star, taunts the black boy. What you gonna do about this, white boy, Holmes? Jerome replies, he's dead, nigga, and then punches Noam in the stomach. Noam cries as they continue to taunt him. Die, niggers! Die! Noam cries out. That's a hate crime. We're gonna sue you, white-ass boy. Gonna sue you, ass white boy. The Dominican replies. The blacks are about to continue punching him, but an administrator catches them and breaks up the fight. Noam leaves abruptly in tears. As Noam is walking home from school, he sees Angel making out with the only pretty blonde white girl in the school. His greasy brown skin, kinky hair, and ugly face desecrating the perfect blonde beauty. Noam thinks, I'll chop off his balls and murder the beast with my bare hands if I ever find out they consummated the vile act. After a bit of snooping, Noam found out that she is Italian-American by her last name, but she has the look of the blonde Jewish girls he had always lusted after, the ones who go to private schools uptown. Noam was never in class with her, but would stare at her from a distance in the yard. She never even acknowledged his existence. He saw her socializing with a group of Dominican guys, one of whom threatened to beat him up if he didn't stop staring at her, but he never imagined she would ever actually stoop to dating beasts like them. A beautiful rose, floating alone in a sea of raw sewage, now sullied and disintegrating into waste, Noam thinks. Noam stares at them in rage and wonders, why would a girl like that date such an ugly subhuman beast, and not a true aristocrat like me? The fairer sex apparently has no sense of justice. I will sort things out once I get into power. Still in tears, Noam chuckles. It begins to rain. Noam walks past the pizza joint and sees Vanessa with her head down in tears after being stood up. He feels bad, but is in such rage, he thinks, I don't need those niggers and spics. They are a useless race of slaves. Noam starts writing down notes in his journal. A true elite would not have to rely upon such filth, a society not ruled by profit and sexual brutes, but true justice, true order, true aristocratic radicalism. I will achieve great things, realize grand aesthetic visions of the past and the future. Let society decay, burn it all down. 99% of humanity has lost its usefulness, a great cleansing of the filth. As Noam writes in rage, he accidentally bumps into an elderly Chinese woman carrying a bucket of stinky fish, which splatters onto Noam's shirt. She starts shouting gobbledygook at him in Cantonese. Noam continues to walk through the pouring rain, still aching from the beatings and the stinking of fish. He stumbles across a Japanese bookstore and steps inside to get out of the rain. He is enamored and overwhelmed by all the aesthetic imagery. He has a $100 bill which his mom had given him for his birthday. He buys a copy of Yukio Mishima's Confessions of a Mask, some teen hentai, which some call lolicon, a book of futuristic photographs, illustrations from Japan in the 1980s by Roger Blackstone, who was running for president, the manga The Poem of the Wind in the Trees, and an illustrated Japanese textbook based on the story of Anne Frank, which he knows will piss off his mom. Noam has always seen himself as a European aristocrat, but there was something about the Japanese aesthetic that intrigued him. The bright neon colors, the perfect harmony, grand visions for the future, yet respect for ancient traditions. Filled with sadness and rage, Noam walks home alone in the rain, passing by the concrete public housing blocks of the Lower East Side, back to his mom's small apartment. He imagines the grim concrete towers covered in bright neon, like the images of Tokyo from the 80s. Noam arrives home soaking wet and covered in bruises, crying. Concerned, his mother asks him, "What's wrong?" Noam complains about the niggers and spics that beat him up. She's upset that he got beaten up, but is more horrified by his racism and reminds him that his grandfather Saul fled the Nazis from Austria as a little boy. She says, "He came to America to escape slavery, and we must be kind and tolerant to all people and understand that not everyone has the same opportunities we do." Saul was a great man, Noam retorts. He contributed a lot to civilization. These beasts are worthless scum. They have no value to society. Somewhat taken aback, Noam's mom emptily replies, "What have you done to help society? Why not be nicer to the other kids and they will give you a chance?" Noam laughs sarcastically. They are low IQ thugs who only respond to strength, power, and violence. Noam's mom is disturbed by his comment and sits in awkward silence, thinking of something to say. "They are nice kids. They just didn't have the same opportunities you did," is all that she can manage to come up with. "What opportunities?" Noam says. "They are filth, but have strength in numbers. I am left alone to rot alone in filth. Not a single friend in the world, even though I'm the best student in my school, straight A's, but nothing to show for it except being a kissless virgin with bruises on my face. Look at me in this tiny little apartment. Goes to a school in the ghetto, getting beaten up and humiliated, and I have it good? You have a lot of potential, Noam. You just need to put yourself out there," she lectures. "Not when I'm surrounded by savages with the collective intellect of a cockroach," he fires back. Clearly offended, his mom scowls disapprovingly and says, "Where did you learn that rhetoric?" "It's just basic common sense," he replies. "Something you and your colleagues from second-rate liberal arts universities who make $30,000 a year yet think they are the intellectual elite don't comprehend." Noam runs into his room and slams his door. Once in his room, Noam takes out the VHS tape of the poem of the wind in the trees. Noam is lucky to still have an old Sanyo VCR, which his mom had from before he was born. Noam just bought the videotape randomly in a binge, but discovers it is a beautiful love story between two boys around his age at a boarding school in 19th century France, which has a very aristocratic setting, the kind of world Noam dreams of living in. Noam wishes he could have a friend like Gilbert to share his deepest secrets, to hold and caress on dark and lonely nights. There are graphic illustrations of naked anime boys, Japanese visions of the Aryan physique. Noam so wants to swim naked with these boys and shares the strongest male bonding, but sadly he never had the chance to experience those pleasures in reality. He was repulsed by all the beastly ghetto boys at his school. Just seeing them in the locker room was rape to his pupils. Bad enough there were very few pretty girls, and the few that there were already taken by ugly beasts and mutants. Worst of all, he was never even allowed to view the male form in its pure beauty. What a crime against nature. Noam takes out the Anne Frank book and opens to the section where there is an anime illustration of young Jewish girls in the showers. Noam originally bought the book for shock value, but is turned on by the graphic illustrations of the cute young Jewish girls with the faces of anime characters. Noam starts masturbating to the images. He imagines himself in the gas chamber, rescuing the girls from their fate, kissing them all over their naked bodies, starting with their lips, then their tiny underdeveloped tits, then down their backs, their cute little buttocks, and their pussies, licking them for hours while changing the course of history, giving them his Aryan seed that his aristocratic father gave him, breeding a new race to save mankind. Just as Noam is about to come, his mom walks in on him masturbating. She finds the book and is horrified. She confiscates it and gives him the silent treatment for the remainder of the evening. He cannot sleep and lies in his bed all night staring at the broken ceiling fan. The sound of flies, the stench of sweat, and his own dried semen which had built up on his sheets over countless lonely nights. Noam looks out the window and fantasizes of his dream world, the Japanese futuristic city from the Blackstone book, fused with the Art Deco film noir aesthetic of old New York from the book his grandfather Saul gave him. Noam imagines he is with a beautiful anime blonde Jewish girl dressed in a colorful silk kimono, sharing the magical experience, looking out over the lights of the city, holding hands, savoring each other's bodies, licking every inch of her sweet, smooth skin, and going down on her for all of eternity. Gnome falls asleep fantasizing about his dream girl. As Gnome's mom wakes him up, he is still making the tongue gesture, from which she was dreaming about giving his fantasy girl pleasure for all eternity. Gnome's mom laughs. Got a fly in your mouth again? This place is infested, but our disgusting slumlord won't even call the exterminator. Gnome blushes awkwardly, but realizes his mom does not understand what just happened. Gnome wonders if the girl from his dream is out there somewhere, and if she is, he has to go out to find her. He knows he isn't going to as long as he's stuck at the school he is at now.